We are going to start with Chapter 4 of Part 5. Chapter 4. We spent the rest of the drive avoiding the topic of drisking. We talked about people we knew, movies we'd seen, hell, we even made a few jokes that didn't fall totally flat. It reminded me of those days when I would sit in my car in the Drisking High parking lot, listening to music and getting stoned. It made me miss Kyle. And weed. I'd given it up for the harder stuff years ago. Or to put it more eloquently, if pot was a Gatorade jug, I left it at the gate. The closer we got to Drisking, the quieter the car became. And by the time we hit the Missouri border, we were in a complete silence. It had started to snow and Kimber was completely focused on the drive. I stared out the window until the dread of familiar things passing by made me look away. We were almost there. Kimber pulled into the Prince Ridge within the hour and got out to check us in. I stayed in the car, eyeing the other vehicles in the parking lot. Nothing I recognized. But seeing as how it had been almost a decade since I'd been home, I wasn't sure if that mattered. The first exiting for Drisking, and there were only the two, was only 4 miles down the highway. If Kimber considered this safe, then there was no reason to worry, right? She'd always been the smart one. I jumped as Kimber jerked the car door open and got in. She noticed, "You know I'm traveling with you, right?" I rolled my eyes. "Pardon me for being a little on edge." 209, she said, pointing up to the second floor. "I'll drive around. You look for it." The room was at the front of the property facing the highway. I brought our bags upstairs and then stood shivering outside in the cold while I smoked a cigarette. When I was finished, I flicked the cigarette over the railing and watched it fall into the bed of maroon Dodge Ram. Oops. I followed Kimber inside and was relieved to see that there were 2 beds and 3 locks on the door. So far, not a complete disaster. Since it was around 6, Kimber wanted to go grab some dinner. Fertilise, Christians, she suggested. They're both only a few miles away. No. Prescott Artisan sandwiches, then? She winked at me. "No," I said again, ignoring your joke. "I mean, we shouldn't leave. We should order delivery or something." Kimber's casual smile fell off her face. "You're worried for no reason, and you're homesick." Kimber's eyes slid to the floor, and she sat down on the end of the bed. "Probably. I just think we need to lay low as much as possible right now." "No, you're right," Kimber said, and tucked her feet up underneath her. She turned to watch the snow fall through the window. I rubbed my temples as an ache began to ebb and like the tide around my eyeballs. I need a fix soon. It doesn't snow in Riverside, where I live. I miss the snow. "Move to Chicago," I said in between deep, measured breaths. "It snows 5 months out of the year." Kimber was silent, and I prayed she was studying a menu. The sooner she got on the phone for delivery, the sooner I could excuse myself to the bathroom and take the edge off. I miss Kyle. I looked up to see Kimber watching the snow, her head leaning against the wall. "Me too," I said after a minute. Her eyes snapped to mine as she'd forgotten I was there. "You look hungry. I'll order pizza from Domino's." "I remember what you like on it," she said before glancing at a menu next to her on the nightstand. She picked up the phone and began dialing the number. I got up to use the bathroom and took my entire duffel bag with me. If Kimber noticed, she didn't say anything. I forced a slice of pizza down for Kimber's sake, though I wasn't hungry in the least. "So, tomorrow," I said, taking the bed nearest the door. "What time are we meeting this person?" Well, it's just going to be me this time." "Yeah, Kimber, there's no way I'm letting you meet with some random drisking fuckwit by herself. I have to be alone or they won't talk to me. Who the fuck is this guy, Kimber? I can't tell you that yet. Is it a woman or a man? I asked. She shook her head at me. And just, what is he giving you tomorrow? The files on Borrasca? No. Then what? I don't actually know. Kimber, this is crazy. I can't let you go into town alone. Sam. Stop being in such a fucking hurry to die, I snapped at her. Kimber's face paled and she moved further away from me on her bed. We'll talk about it in the morning, she whispered, and then turned off the lamp. Fine. I laid in the dark for a while. And when I was sure she was asleep, I went back into the bathroom for another hit. By the time I woke up the next morning, Kimber was gone. Chapter 5. I called Kimber 34 times in 5 minutes. It was 10 in the morning and I hadn't heard her leave. Hadn't even woken up when she did. I cursed her and my dope in the same breath. If she didn't answer soon, I would be forced to walk the 3.5 miles to downtown Drisking and start asking around for her. A course of action that would get me noticed real fucking quick. I paced the patio for a half an hour and smoked a cigarette after cigarette. Thankful I'd packed an entire carton. Just as I was pulling on my boots to leave, my phone rang. I was relieved to see Kimber's number pop up. A new addition to my phone book that would have unfurled a comforting warmth in my stomach if I weren't so irate. I answered, "What the fuck, Kimber?" I'm sorry, Sam, I had to. He wasn't going to meet me otherwise. Where are you? I'm in the car. I'm almost back. They haven't plowed yet in town. Really? In bucolic perfect little Drisking? They haven't plowed the roads by 10 on a Friday morning? I thought it was weird too. There's more. I'll tell you when I get there. Don't get off the phone with me until you pull into the parking lot. Okay. I opened the door and went straight out of the cold for Kimber's car. My heart didn't slow to a normal rate until I finally saw it driving into the parking lot. She pulled into the space below our door and ran up the stairs. I'm sorry, I had to. Don't be mad. Are you fucking kidding me with this, Kimber? I'm already on edge. I can barely fucking breathe. Okay, just sit down. She pushed me into the room and sat me down onto the edge of the bed, pulling off her gloves. Then she crouched in front of me and took me by the shoulders, looking me in the eye. The sheriff and most of his deputies are engaged today, which I was told means they are up at Borrasca. And that means that A, they don't know we're here, and B, we can go into town and start discreetly looking around. As opposed to driving up to Borrasca and killing them now? Kimber stood up. I want them dead, Sam, more than anything, but you know what else I want? I want their crimes to be known to the world. They don't get to die with their good names. They don't get to be martyrs. I want the records, I said. Yes. What do you plan to do with them if you get them? Upload them onto the internet or something. Send them to the FBI. The FBI doesn't care. We need the records, Sam. I want everyone to know what happened to us. Kimber's voice had risen an octave, and she seemed on the verge of an anxiety attack. Okay. I stood up. Maybe Seth can help. Your roommate? How? She asked. He does some pretty illegal stuff online. Maybe he can break into a mainframe or whatever and download the files. So he's a hacker. He yells at me when I call him that. Is he any good? I shrugged. He's well known in certain circles. She nodded. Well, we need those files. I just need you to find out where they keep them. Are we sure they even really keep records on Borrasca? Seems like a huge liability. An operation that size has to have records, and my source told me they exist. Great. Your source. I rolled my eyes. Okay, so you want to go into town and what? Ask around about them? Kimber narrowed her eyes at me. That's idiotic. I was thinking more maybe we find out where the Cleary house is and, like, get the information out of Grace Cleary. I raised my eyebrows at her. You want to torture an old lady? Kimber fucking exploded. An old lady that helped to rape, torture, and murder hundreds of women over 50 years. Fuck yeah, I want to torture that old lady. Alright. Alright. Look, I may know someone who might be sympathetic, and I'm reasonably sure that, unlike your contact, she's innocent of any knowledge of Borrasca. In fact, she's the one who helped me and Kyle find you. At the very least, she'll know where the Clearys live now. The drive into town took twice as long as it should have due to the snow. Why haven't they plowed these roads? I asked idly. It's not just the roads, it's everything, Kimber said grimly. A lot of stores have closed in town. Buildings are in disrepair. Everything looks like shit. They don't even have any Christmas lights up. It's bizarre. That's fucking weird. Are we even sure that Borrasca is still running? The town looks pretty destitute. I am, Kimber said and pointed to a bulletin board on the corner of 2nd and Osborne, which had 6 different and seemingly recent missing persons posters. What the fuck is going on? I murmured as we turned onto Main and into the downtown marketplace. Everything in town was as Kimber had described. Run down and ostensibly poor. What happened to this place? I don't know, but lucky for us, the antiquity shop is still in business, Kimber said, pointing across the road. As we park, I zipped my parka up to my neck and lowered my hat down to my eyes. Kimber did the same. The most important thing right now was not being recognized. Mr. Dranger was still behind the antiquities counter after all these years, but gone was his air of haughtiness and pretentious stare. He regarded us coolly but professionally until it was clear we were only traveling through his shop to get to Catherine Scanlon's office at the back. He mumbled something under his breath, and though I didn't catch it, I was reasonably sure there had been no sign of recognition in his face nor his words. When we arrived at the office door of the Prehistoric Preservation Society of Drisking, I knocked softly and listened for Catherine's voice. Instead, the door was yanked violently open by a man I'd never seen before. May I help you? He asked as he eyed us up and down. Yes, you can, I said. All right then, come on in. I'm Don Wheeler, and who are you? Kimber and I exchanged a careful look and entered the room cautiously. Actually, we're looking for Catherine Scanlon, I said. I didn't like the way he was staring at Kimber. Oh, Miss Scanlon, he said, not taking his eyes from her. You haven't heard then? My stomach retched. We haven't, Kimber said, pulling her jacket around her more tightly. Sad business, truly. Disappeared, 9 years ago now. 10? Most people assume she didn't take Wyatt's death well and just walked out into the woods to... Don Wheeler suddenly looked up and seemed to remember his audience. I'm so sorry. Were you all friends? I ignored his question and asked one of my own. Did she ever surface again? Maybe in another state? No, I'm afraid she's dead. Don Wheeler shook his head. She was such a young thing, too. And her remains? Kimber asked. Nothing was ever found, I'm afraid. I was starting to feel ill. Well, then we'd better... Do you happen to know where the Clearys live? Kimber interrupted. Grace and Killian? Of course, old friends of mine. Fuck. But you must have heard. Thank you for your time. We really have to go. Come on, Allison. I yanked Kimber out of the room and shut the door behind us. Before I could hear a harsh word out, I'd fallen against the wall, trying to quell the building panic and nausea. He knew. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked, Kimber said quickly. I just thought maybe I held a finger up as I leaned against the wall with my head between my knees, trying to compose myself. Kimber rubbed my back as I swallowed down the bile and waited for the dizziness to pass. Finally, I stood up. We have to go. I didn't even look at Dranger as we made our way out of the shop, but I could feel him watching us. My mind briefly wandered into the past, and I wondered where his daughter was now. I'd never liked Phoebe, but I hoped she'd escaped this town. Prayed she had. The streets were busier than they had been several minutes before when we'd entered the antiquity shop. There were several dozen people trudging through the snow down Main. I wasn't sure where they were heading, since half the stores were closed and the city hadn't bothered to put up their tree this year. Kimber walked around to the driver's side of the side door of her car. I stared over her head at the people walking by across the street. I hoped my height, beard, and skeleton-like frame disguised me well enough because people were starting to look back. I almost hoped one of them was Cleary Prescott or the fucking sheriff. We had a trunk full of guns and I wanted this all over with. I needed to go back to the motel and bury myself in smack. And this time I didn't even want to wake up again. And then suddenly, just as Kimber sat down into the driver's seat, I did recognize someone. It was Mira Grady. And she was holding a little boy's hand. And as I started, I realized who that little boy was. And then I saw nothing but red. Chapter 6. My body was moving, but I wasn't in control of it. I was suddenly walking across the street with the most intense rage I'd ever felt. How dare she? How dare she? I was in front of Mira before I could get back in control. What the fuck do you think you're doing? She jumped and her eyes snapped up to my face in fear. Excuse me? She pushed the kid behind her. Let go of my nephew. What? Who are you? This is my son, she yelled. People were stopping to watch. That is Whitney Walker's son, and you know it, you cold-blooded, callous bitch. Mira's face had gone white. Sam? Give me my fucking nephew, Mira. The boy started quietly crying and whispering, Mommy, in distress. What are you doing? Stop it. Kimber was pulling at my arm, trying to turn me back towards the car, but I wasn't moving. I was seething with a fury I had suppressed for 9 years. Owen? Mira started screaming. Owen, please. Grady came sprinting out of the doorway of the stop next door. He took one look at the situation, pushed his wife and the boy behind him, and raised his fist to hit me. But there was fear in his eyes. Let's go, Sam, I heard Kimber yell. Give me my nephew. I screamed at Owen in spitting red rage, and suddenly I felt a slap across my face. The strike served its purpose. Reality began to bleed back into the world, and I realized exactly where I was and what I was doing. Kimber was standing in front of me, in between Owen and I. Her hood had fallen down in the commotion, and her hair was spilling out of her beanie and down her back in a wild, bright waterfall of crimson. She looked scared. We were exposed. Owen Grady lowered his fist and seemed to realize who I was. He began screaming at the top of his lungs, Get the cops! Get the sheriff! Get him now! I was already moving, climbing into the driver's seat of Kimber's car, leaving her no choice but to get in on the other side. She handed me the keys, and I turned the car on and hit the gas, giving no regard to the slippery roads. Kimber screamed as I fishtailed, trying to get off Main, and then at every corner after, desperate to escape the scene I'd caused. The car slid into a snowdrift just outside of town. I'd rocked the car in and out of drive and reverse until the tires finally found purchase on the road, and then we were speeding out of town again. There were no other options. I'd blown it. I knew exactly where I needed to go now. Stop. Stop and get out of the car, Sam. You're high. You'll kill us both. Don't do their work for them. That was Whitney's son. That was my nephew. Why would you think that, Sam? Because I know. I put it together years ago. You want me to trust you and your mysterious source? Well, trust me when I say that that kid was my nephew. Okay, just slow down, please. Where are you taking us? Where we should have gone in the first place. No, Kimber was shaking her head wildly. No, Sam, no, we can't go there. Not yet. Yeah, well, I have to go. They know we're here now. The sheriff will be hunting us by nightfall. It's now or never. But the car will never make it up that road. Oh, I'm willing to bet that road is plowed. Going all the way up to... Yes. I was right. Less than 2 miles away, we found that road. It was one I had used only once. And by all logic, I should only barely remember it. But I'd seen that dirt road in my nightmares for years. I was on that road. I had sped down that road trying to save my best friend. I'd failed then. I wouldn't now. We drove up the side of the mountain in Kimber's Mazda at an unimaginable speed. I needed to get to Borrasca before the adrenaline wore off. I needed to kill them. Cleary, Prescott, my father, all the deputies, the local cops, everyone involved, and I needed to die doing it. I wanted to, but then where did that leave Kimber? The higher we got up the mountain, the clearer the air, and the clearer my mind. The uncontrollable madness that had puppeted my every action for the last 30 minutes was draining away. I chanced to glance over at Kimber. Her face was as pale as a moonbeam, but her jaw was set in resolve. She was with me 100%, even though we were on a suicide mission. My heart lurched. My death was inevitable. Even acceptable. But Kimber had already suffered so much. I couldn't bring her back to Borrasca, could I? I slowed the car to a stop when I realized that I couldn't remember why we were headed up to Borrasca in the first place. They knew we were here, right? No? Or did they? What had I done? I couldn't remember what had happened in town, but I didn't want to admit it. Will you drive us back to the hotel? I asked as my heart slowed and the strength began to drain from my body. No, Kimber said softly, staring into the trees next to us. She turned to look at me. We're already here. The road kept winding up the mountain, but subconsciously or not, I had stopped right at the proverbial gates of the North Central Mine, known as Hell on Earth to many, and Borrasca to the rest. I felt paralyzed, unable to move or speak or even think. I listened intently for the sounds that had scored my nightmares. But all was as silent as death. They would know we're here. They would have heard us coming. It was now or never. Stay in the car, Kimber, I told her, and she gave me a look I couldn't read as I opened the door. I walked to the back of the car, popped the trunk, and pulled out a 9mm Beretta I had seen when she'd show me the guns on the highway. Checking to make sure the clip was loaded, I chambered around. I knocked gently on Kimber's window and she rolled it down, her eyes glued to the gun in my hand. Stay here, I whispered, and if you hear any gunfire, bolt. She gave me an appraising look. I don't think you're in any space to do this right now. I knelt down in the snow so I was eye level with her. I agree with you, but this is the only chance we have, right? It wasn't a rhetorical question, but she didn't know that. Because of your fucking antics in town, Kimber said icily. She opened the car door. I'll go with you. No, I hissed into the cold mountain air. But she was already walking to the back of the car and opening the trunk. I knew any confrontation with her at this point would be so loud, so I had to weigh my options carefully. Kimber pulled out the pump-action shotgun. "Do you even know how to use that?" I asked. Kimber racked the shotgun with one hand as she walked past me toward the mine. "Don't mock me, Sam. You'd be very surprised what I know about guns." Her point taken. I ran to catch up. You know, if we do this now, we'll never get the records. They'll be dead, we'll be dead, but Borrasca will just continue. Maybe we should just wait. It was your idea to come here now. I'm having second thoughts. But isn't that your life, Sam? A series of second thoughts and regrets, she snapped. Shh, Jesus, Kimber. This is just recon, okay? Don't get spotted and don't make a fucking sound, I whispered. The snow this far up the mountain was almost a foot deep. There would be no hiding that we had been here if we somehow got out alive. We made our way into the camp, using the trees as cover. And as we moved, I noticed that the driveway into Borrasca showed no signs of tire tracks in the new snowfall. Were they sleeping up here? Were there sentries on duty even now watching us? I turned around to find Kimber, but she was now more than 10 yards to my left, further away than I could hope to whisper. The closer we got to the camp, the more I began to feel it. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I could see the dorms through the trees, still standing exactly as I had remembered him. However, the skinned men sign had lost the support and was buckling precariously in the middle. The large building that housed the shiny gentleman was also standing, and the door had been left slightly ajar so that I could see the conveyor belt feeding into the machine. My blood, like everything else, froze to ice. Kimber was suddenly beside me, her hand clenched around the shotgun which hung at her side. "It's gone," she said louder than I would have liked to. She was right. It was too quiet. "It looks that way," I croaked, and bent over at the waist to quiet a sudden dizziness. She turned to look at me, wide-eyed and panicked. Tears began to well at the corners of her eyes. I stood up to give her a hug, man, and she pushed me away. "It's gone. It's all gone." I took a few deep breaths. "Let me look around. We should check the dorms." Kimber tried to swallow a sob and I glanced over at her. Had I really just suggest she walk back into the dorms after what had happened to her there? Was I that fucking cruel? That was a fucking mess. I gently pushed the shotgun up and closer to her chest. "Stay here." I stepped out into the clearing and in no particular hurry. If I was going to get shot, I sure as hell wasn't going to die cramped and tired. But the air in camp was still, and no bullets came out to meet me. I wanted to get in and out of the dorms as fast as possible. This was a terrible place. So much suffering, so much pain and death. If there was no enemy to kill, then I wanted to step off the hallowed grounds as quickly as I could and get the fuck out of there. I opened the same door that Kyle and I had first gone into almost 10 years before. The stench still lingered, drifting in the stale air and mingling with the fear and tension that had yet to dissipate after a decade. But the beds were gone. I went quickly from room to room and verified that the building was completely empty. Kimber saw me emerge from the other door, and I gave her a shake of my head. I was only a few steps away from the building when I began to feel dizzy again. My vision narrowed, and I started to lose control. The last thing I heard was Kimber's voice as she screamed my name, and then came the familiar, welcoming darkness. Well, that concludes this episode, chapters 4, 5, and 6 of part 5 of Borrasca. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe over on YouTube. You know, do the thing. It's much appreciated. As the good saying goes over here, be good when you can, or be good at it. We will see you with chapters 7 through 10 next time. Alrighty, guys. Have a great night, day. Be good when you can, or be good at it, guys.